MBA Experience. My name is Al D. I am the founder of MBA Schooled, as well as the author of MBA Insider, and I am a UNC Kenan-Flagler alum, so go Tar Heels, and thank you for joining this afternoon. We have a great program here for you today, and we're glad that you're joining us and taking some time out of your Sunday to prepare for your MBA experience. So very quickly, again, my name's Al. I'm the founder of MBA Schooled, and if you want to contact me, here's where you can find me. So just a couple housekeeping items for all of you before we get started. So number one, please stay on mute, but feel free to use the chat function throughout the entire webinar to share your feedback, your thoughts, your ideas, or your questions. And then the second thing is that we are recording this, and we'll make sure that you all get a copy of it after this happens. And so really quickly, as I mentioned, I am the founder of mbaschool.com, which is a blog about how to navigate the MBA experience to grow your career. And so if you haven't checked out mbaschool.com, I would definitely head over there. And in addition to that, I'm also the author of MBA Insider, which is a book, which is a how-to guide for navigating the MBA experience. So for the past 5 years, I've been really thinking and studying this topic. And about a year ago, I went out and did some research, interviewed hundreds of MBA students, and I wrote a guide about how you can navigate business school to make the most of your MBA experience. It's a great guide to help you walk you through the very beginning of your time, including leading up to business school, so right now, all the way through graduation day. And it has practical tips and best practices that are really relevant and really helpful to all of you. And it features over 60 different MBA students' stories. So if you like what you hear in this webinar, definitely go check the book out because there's a lot of great insights in there for all of you. But today I'm going to share a little bit of some of the insights from MBA Insider just to kick off before I turn it over to my amazing panelists. But to do that, what I want to do is I want to talk a little about and just context set and level set with all of you just about what you're going into in terms of business school. Certainly, you know a little bit of this because you've done all your homework, you've done your applications, you've put down your deposit, and you're ready to go. But when I think about the MBA experience and really what makes it special and what makes it unique, it really comes back to, I think, 4 key things. The first thing is that it's 2 years to really invest in yourself. For the next 2 years, your sole job really is to think about how you can grow, how you can achieve that next set of career goals, and how you can build the skills and experiences you need to set yourself up for long-term success. While many of you, I'm sure, were trying to develop your careers on the side while you were working, very rarely do you get a chance to spend 2 sole years just focusing on that. And the second thing is all about the resources. MBA programs, all of which you are attending, all the top ones, have incredible resources for their students to take advantage of, whether it's top-notch professors, whether it's the various programs that they offer to help you get real-world skills, whether it's faculty administrators, and then certainly all the career resources that you have. Anything that you need that you want to go out and do, there are resources that are able to help you kind of go and achieve that. The third is just this idea around being around really smart, really hardworking, and really intelligent people. Many of you probably went to business school because of the fact that you wanted to grow your network or you wanted to take advantage of the network that your school was going to provide. And not only is that network going to help you in terms of maybe helping you land a job, but these are also people you can learn from and learn with. You go through the experience together with a cohort of other classmates. And these are not only people who are in a couple years going to maybe help you land that next job, but when you're in school, they're going to be able to teach you things and you're going to be able to teach them things. And I think it really makes for a great bonding experience. And last but not least, just a stimulative and supportive environment. Going back to what I was saying earlier, you have 2 years to really develop yourself. And the great thing about business school and being in kind of an academic or education-based environment is the fact that you will have the chance to learn and grow. One of the things that is really great about business school is that while I wouldn't call it an entirely fail-safe environment, it's a great place to take risks and to try new things or to really push yourself. Because not only is it a little bit safer to do in this environment than maybe in the workplace, but when you do challenge yourself and maybe slip up or maybe fail, you have people who can help you kind of learn through that experience. And so there are many reasons to go to business school, but when I think about what you're walking into and part of the reason why it's so exciting, these are some of the environmental conditions or the cultural conditions of the MBA experience that I think will help as you think about how you can really take advantage of your time there. But with that, while it is really exciting, it can also be really challenging. It can be really overwhelming. And This is based off of some of the research I've done in MBA Insider, as well as a lot of my conversations with MBA students. And when I ask them about, what are some of the challenges that you faced in terms of entering business school, or what are some of the challenges unique in the MBA environment, there's a couple that come to mind. The first is that it goes by really fast. And I think my panelists kind of attest to it, the fact that they are already halfway done, or a little bit over, almost a little bit more than halfway through their MBA experience. Time really does fly. And if you're not being thoughtful about how you're planning or how you're taking advantage of any given moment, it can be really easy to feel overwhelmed. On that notion of being overwhelmed, there's so much that's going on, particularly early on in that first semester. A constant phrase you hear over and over again is this idea of constantly drinking from a fire hose. And it always just seems like there's so many things that are important that all need to get done. It can be tough to kind of manage. And on that notion, one of the things I always say about business school is that one of the values of business school is that there are so many amazing opportunities. And one of the challenges of business school is that there are so many amazing opportunities. It can be really hard to prioritize, what to take or how to, or what to choose. And on that notion of choosing, one of the things that happens all the time in business school, and I think my panelists can attest to this in some kind of capacity, but this idea of FOMO, or the fear of missing out, because there are so many great experiences, many of which your classmates are all taking advantage of. And if you can't do something for one reason or another, because maybe you have another commitment, it can be easy to feel like you're missing out on the greatest thing ever. I liken it to like that party freshman year that you can't go to for whatever reason. You think the world is ending because you think it's like the party of the century and you can't get in, and that there'll never be another party ever again. Spoiler alert, there is. It's usually the following weekend. But in the moment, you think that it's the only thing that matters. And then last but not least, and this one's a little bit new, is just this idea of managing the unexpected. And certainly everyone always has to manage a little bit of the unexpected. But COVID-19 really threw everyone for a loop, and business school is no different. And we're going to talk a little bit about that a little bit later on, but it certainly disrupted a lot of things. And as we move forward, it certainly will continue to impact the way that this experience is going to play out for you. So that's just kind of just to set context of both what's exciting, but also what's challenging ahead. And before I turn it over to my panelists, I do want to go through a couple poll questions, just because I think it'll be valuable just to see where everyone's at. And so I go to this next poll right here, and just using the chat. So I listed out maybe 5 challenges, and would love for you to kind of take a look at these challenges. And in the chat, just mark the letter that resonates most strongly with you. So if it's challenge A, just put A. If it's B, put B. If it's C, put C, etc. We'll just see where everyone's kind of at right now in terms of how they're thinking about some of the challenges. So looks like we got a couple E's. We got one C. We're all kind of a little bit all over the place. A bunch of A's, C's, okay. B, B, string of B's. All right. Jeff's really hedging here. C, a little bit of E. Yeah, that's fair. I get that. E. Okay, yeah. So we're kind of really all over the place. That's great. Well, what I want to do now is I sent out a pre-webinar kind of survey, and what I wanted to do before I turn it over to my panelists is just to kind of walk through some of the answers, just to kind of give you context for how some of your peers kind of thought about preparing for business school. So for the first question I asked, that I'd love to get your feedback on, is how are you preparing for business school? And here were what the responses were. So it sounds like a bunch of you were taking some math or quant classes, which makes a lot of sense. A bunch of you are reading some business books. If you're reading any business books, put in the chat what you're reading. I can always use good book recommendations. I'm sure some of you can as well. Some of you were completing your school's pre-MBA materials, kind of varied school by school. A couple of you real go-getters are filling out those career deliverables, whether it's updating your resume, your LinkedIn profile. Some of you are just listening to what your career center was telling you. Okay, that sounds great. And then a bunch of you were taking your school's mandatory pre-work. So How to Win Friends and Influence People, Dale Carnegie. That's a classic. I think everyone should read that at some point in their life, particularly if you're trying to learn how to build relationships personally or in the workplace. All right, Manolo is reading The Goal. I read that in business school. Actually, funny story. My uncle read that when he was in business school in the 80s. So it's a classic MBA book. All right, great. And then the other question that I asked was, what is your biggest concern before entering school? So COVID, the impact of COVID across the entire MBA experience, prioritization and time management. How do you manage everything that's going on? How do you know what to do at any given time? Whoever said that, whenever you figure that out, let me know. It's a tough one. The newness of business school. My biggest concern is starting day one and having no idea what to do and then failing. Yeah, no, I know I felt that at some point for sure. Careers in recruiting. How much time will I have before I have to determine what I want to recruit for? That is a great question. That is definitely something I'm going to be asking my panelists. And then logistics. This one makes a little bit of sense. So getting your visa, being able to move to the country, finding an apartment. Yeah, those are all really, really important things. Okay, yeah. I see some of you all are doing this now. Yeah, definitely put in what yours are. And I highly recommend Ride of a Lifetime, just as I believe Vinitha and someone else and Sarah both recommended. That's a great book. It's a great book. B, C. All right. Awesome. Okay. Well, this is great. It's good level setting just to see where you are. Don't worry, we're going to cover all of these topics with our panelists. But I do want to go to our panelists right now just to do a round of introductions before we get into the Q&A. So with that, I'm joined today by three people, and I'd love for them to maybe just do a brief intro of themselves. So we'll just go by the photos. So Elijah, you're first. And so maybe what you can do is you can tell me your name, where you go to school, and then maybe either the last book you read or the last podcast you listened to or what you're watching on Netflix or Hulu right now. Let's go with that.
Sounds good. Hey, everybody, this is Elijah Chang. I'm currently a second year at Duke's Fuqua School of Business. The last book I read was When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi. I don't know if you guys have heard of that, but it's a really interesting book about a neurosurgeon who is diagnosed with cancer during his last year of residency. It's a powerful look, and it's a nice way to take a step back and think about how privileged we are to be where we are. So highly recommend it.
It's great. How about you, Courtney?
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Courtney Edmonds. I'm a rising second year at NYU Stern. The last book that I read was The Water Dancer by Ta-Nehisi Coates. So he's very much known for his nonfiction writing, especially his piece in The Atlantic about reparations. This book is very interesting. It's an interesting approach to a departure from a slave narrative. So looking at kind of like the Black experience post-Civil War, but with a lot of like fantasy and mysticism added into it. So I'm personally trying to stay away from the business books, but I definitely wrote down a lot of your guys' suggestions. So thanks for that.
Great. Marielle, bring us home.
Yeah, so I'm Marielle Senna. I'm a rising MBA 2 at Michigan. And when it comes to all the things I've been reading, I have been trying to now get back into podcasts. It was something I kind of let go after I stopped commuting to work and had friends. I'm in the consortium at Ross. Recommend 1619 to me. So I've been listening to this podcast because so much of our history really left out, like the history in particular of the like Black community and African American experience. So it's been really interesting just to learn more about that, especially I'm from California. So that's definitely a lot of history that's missing for me. I know a lot about California history, but not sort of the broader US and definitely not the Black experience. So it's something that I've found really compelling, highly recommend for those that are sort of really looking to build that muscle in particular too, as you prepare for business school.
Great. I think that's great. So I'm going to go with the first question, and I'm going to start with you, Marielle, because I'm looking at your tile right now. So I guess maybe just to start, one of the things that came up, I prompted it, but it also came up in the survey, was just this idea of the whirlwind of the first semester or the first 2 quarters, however you kind of define it for your school. So could you maybe give some context as to what that experience was like for you, and just how you navigated it, knowing, because it is, speaking from experience, it is pretty challenging.
I think I was really fortunate in that I had spoken to a lot of current students who really made a point of like as much as you can prepare, like academically, and as much as you can prepare even professionally, just to really take stock of like what you want your experience to be. Like you all wrote about it in your essays to some degree, and you all thought about like what you want to do from a recruiting standpoint, and potentially even pitch some clubs you're going to be involved with. But I think really like something that really helped me in the whirlwind was thinking about like, not only what do I want to get at this business school experience, but like who do I want to be in this business school experience? Like almost like setting an intention. And I think that's honestly what helped me in terms of like Al said, it's a lot like a buffet. You're sort of like overwhelmed by the options. But I think if you sort of like are true to your quote unquote dietary restrictions or your goal of the meal, like I think that then you're able to sort of like walk away and not feel the hangover, the illness that you can sort of get if you just like let the experience kind of wash over you or sort of take the driver's seat. So really what to expect, I think, is really, there's going to be a barrage of like, all of a sudden you're going to learn about new professional opportunities. Maybe you've ditched the one in your essay, and that's totally fine. Or maybe you have decided initially, like, I thought I wanted to do human capital and was focusing a lot on MO courses, and now I'm really interested in marketing. So I think you're going to have a lot of academic interests, and then like socially, you're going to have the opportunity to meet a lot of new people, clubs. So I think that those first few weeks can really shape, I think, what the rest of your experience looks like, especially as you formalize some of your commitments through clubs and things of that nature. So I think if you know what you're looking to get out of the experience, the more that you choose clubs and things that can sort of provide structure to building out those goals, and or you find other means of, you really want to build structure and ensure that those goals have like sort of accountability partners to them, if you will, so that it's not just you sort of left to your own devices, because there's so much going on.
No, I think you're right. And I think you're absolutely right too about the accountability piece, right? And so I think it does, particularly because you all have the time in theory right now, is to start thinking about what some of those goals you might have for yourself, or to your point, what you said, like who you want to be. And, and always, if you can start with the end in mind and work backward, I think that's always a great kind of approach to have it. So, like at the end of year one, like what does success look like for you? And if you can kind of define that, and then you can start to think about, well, what does that mean for the rest of the year? Or what does that mean for the clubs I need to take, or the classes I need to focus on, all those types of things. Courtney, I want to go over to you for a second. So one of the things for you, at least, because I know this because your background, but you recruited for management consulting. You're also now the president of the Stern Management Consulting Association. So consulting is very much, for those who don't know this, a pretty demanding recruiting requirement. I mean, recruiting is demanding in general, but in particular, it really is pretty demanding. But for anyone who's listening, just how is that experience like in the first 2 quarters of that first semester with something like consulting recruiting, and how did you have to like manage that? Because it's a lot to do, but in addition to that, you certainly had your coursework, and certainly you had assignments with your study teams, and maybe you had some events afterwards, but also still had to think about, how do I make sure I still contribute to my study team and the like? How were you able to kind of like still focus on recruiting, but also make sure that some of these other priorities that you knew were important still got kind of their due?
Yeah, that's a great question. Recruiting is going to be challenging regardless of what you do. For things like consulting, it's very, very challenging with the cyclical nature of it, and the very tight time frame that you have from a preparation standpoint. And preparation for recruiting, just to be clear, is not just the let me learn how to case and nail the case, or learn the behaviorals and nail the behaviorals. It's also, how do I even get the interview in the first place? And that means making honest and meaningful connections across a variety of firms that are genuinely interesting to me and where I could see myself. So it was definitely a challenge. I want to echo back to Marielle's point about setting goals, because I think that's really, really critical to be able to not put blinders on, but just know what success looks like at the end of your 2 years. And so you can know that as long as you check those things off, you've been great, and everything else that you do manage to fit in is icing on top of the cake, frankly. So the way that I managed it was thinking about all right, I have my professional goals, I have my social slash like career, or not career, but like club oriented goals. And then I have the goals that I need for myself just to be able to like bring my best self to all of those arenas of my MBA experience. So from the career aspect of it, I think what was really critical was that I knew from day one consulting was plan A. I had a plan B, but I needed to come in knowing that that was going to be plan A, so that I would be able to dedicate as much time to it as possible, because it is very demanding. So I think what's important, like what you can take away from that, is use this time during the summer, which you're already doing now by being a part of these conversations, to really outline what is my plan A and what is my plan B, so that you can go into the school semester knowing this is what I want to recruit for. And if it's wrong, that's okay, because you can change, but you want to like test that hypothesis and fail fast so you can like quickly redirect, not feel like you're getting lost in the shuffle or losing out on time. So coming in knowing that that was my plan, exactly the firms I wanted to make connections with and what I needed to do to be successful, was really critical for me on the preparation side. On the schoolwork slash club engagement side, that was setting like pretty narrow goals, to be honest. So I made an appointment very early on with my Office of Career Development. We call it OCD at Stern, which is kind of a weird acronym in retrospect, but I made an appointment early on with one of the people there, which I do urge you all to do with your schools. I think a lot of people say, I'm not sure, I don't know what I want to do, so I don't know what to talk to them about. But it's also their job to help coach you through what it is that you want to do. So we talked in terms of, I'm going to focus on consulting. What that means is this is kind of the time that I'm going to have to dedicate. So I'm going to focus on 2 or 3 clubs that are really important to me. One from a professional standpoint, and then one from like a social standpoint. So I was very involved with my affinity group, with Hispanic and Black business students, as well as some other like more social groups that I was just a participant of. But I only took on board 2 board positions that I would have the time to dedicate to the academics and then to the recruiting. And then from the personal side, like that last component, so I can bring my best self, a lot of it was have the grace to know that I don't have to say yes to everything, but now that I have this like narrow focus of what is important to me and what's going to help me to achieve my goals, then it's just like backfilling what is the self-care that I need to do. So I don't need to be out every single night, making sure that I'm getting good amount of sleep as much as possible. And if I can't do it during the week, like make sure I can do that on weekends. So some of like those little things that are going to make me feel as comfortable as possible. And I think that helped with, you know, spreading out the commitments, but also spreading in a little bit of the self-care to make everything manageable. But it really did require like very intentional planning up front, with the idea that if this is going to be wrong, if consulting is not the right fit for me, I want to know that early on so that I can like reshift into what's going to be the right fit for me post MBA.
Yeah, a lot of great insight there. A couple things. Number one, I really think it's important on the self-care piece, or if, you know, just in general, just the idea of taking care of yourself. Business school is a challenging experience. And I think the better you will show up as your best self when you spend the time to take care of yourself. I mean, just simple as that. And so while it will, you know, get busy, while there will be a lot of things that you need to do, I highly encourage you, and it sounds like my panelists agree, to figure out the things you need to do to bring your best self to work each day. So highly recommend that. Elijah, I want to go over to you, but before I do that, would love to hear from the folks in the audience. Please use the chat. Why don't you throw in what you think you want to recruit for in the fall? And if you're not sure, you say what you're between. And if you're really not sure, just say not sure, but just throw it in the chat just so we can get a good sense of where everyone's at of what you want to recruit for. So Elijah, what I wanted to go over to you for was, I know you did have a couple ideas of what you wanted to recruit for, and there's maybe a couple paths. So I know there are some people, I'm already looking at the responses right now, who are maybe vacillating between a couple things. How did you kind of manage the fact that you were evaluating a couple different options, and then certainly while, you know, having to balance everything else that you were doing too?
Yeah, that's a great question. For context, guys, what I was deciding between recruiting for was management consulting, product management, and brand management. And what I did was I took the route of recruiting for all 3 at the same time. Thankfully, when you recruit for product management and brand management, it's not so time consuming compared to recruiting for management consulting. I completely just would echo everything that Courtney was saying about recruiting for consulting. It takes a lot of time, particularly in the evenings when you have to commit time to socializing, making those really important connections. it sucks a lot of time from other aspects of your schedule that you would consider important. So you really need to be intentional. But because product management and brand management weren't so time intensive, basically all I had to put in was early on when different firms came to campus, I would take maybe an hour or two in the evening to meet up with them, make sure I had someone's contact who I had a great conversation with, make sure I had someone I knew who knew me and who liked me. This is really, really important, guys. By the way, people don't say this that much, but likability is key. Not manufactured likability, not forced likability, but just being your genuine self and being someone that someone would want to work with. I mean, I wouldn't want to hire someone that I don't like. So that's really important when you're going to these events. And honestly, it saves you a lot of time. So what I did with product management and brand management was I just made sure I had someone I knew who I had a good relationship with, and I just kept tabs with them, and I made sure they still remembered who I was while I was spending the majority of my time recruiting for consulting. Ultimately, I did decide to go with, actually, interestingly enough, a hybrid product / brand management role at Abbott. But I will say, for those of you who are concerned, I don't know how to choose between A, B, or C, it is possible to navigate or just simultaneously pursue multiple options at the same time, because not all options are as time consuming as, say, consulting or investment banking are. It will be a little tougher because you do have to put in that extra, few hours a week. But if those other options matter a lot to you, you'll be willing to put in the time. And frankly, if you find yourself not willing to put in the time, that just means those other options should be removed from your list, and you should be more intentional about the time consuming option. So that's basically what I did, and I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I think that's a really good point. Like if you find yourself not wanting to put in the time, that is your answer right there. I think where I sometimes see the mistake, and I'll throw it back to you, Elijah, because I'm staring at you again. A lot of people go to business school because they do want that chance to explore. And the nice thing about business school is that you will have the chance to decide how you want to allocate your time. The challenge is sometimes is that whenever you choose to make a choice to spend your time on something, you're acknowledging that you're not going to be spending time on something else. And so it's more of just a trade-off. And so I always tell people, like, yeah, if you want to spend 4 months like exploring like 12 careers, like, yeah, like you could do that. But at what cost is that going to come at in terms of all the other things that you might have like on your checklist of like things that you want to do in business school, whether it's in a classroom or whether it's through student activities or et cetera. And so it's less about the notion of like, no, like you like if you need to explore, like you should explore, you should feel confident in what you want to do. It's just that you may not necessarily have the chance to spend your entire time doing it if you want to do other things as well. Cool. I want to go over to Courtney again. So one thing that I was gonna ask you about, just in terms of academics. So one of the, I think, comments that I got was just what that experience was like. And obviously, I think most people to a certain degree have a level set in terms of going back into the classroom. Certainly some people had some experience in business classes in undergrad, but some didn't. So there's maybe a little bit of that there. There's certainly a little bit of adjustment of many of you have been working anywhere from like 2 to 5 years, and it may have been a while since you've been in the classroom. So there's a little bit of adjustment there. And then the other element of this too is that, everyone pretty much is in a cohort or like a cohort or like a group. And then you have kind of like your study team or your learning team. So I'm just curious for you, how you kind of navigated some of those aspects of the academic experience, and then also thinking about like how you navigated academics with something like career or student activities, because both of those were also important to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what was really motivating for me to come back to school and get my MBA was getting a challenge again and being able to learn again. So I'm on the longer end of work experience in terms of being out of the classroom. I worked for about 8.5 years before going back to school. So it was a very big transition to just be back in a classroom, learn how to navigate keeping track of school deliverables, lectures, readings, notes, on top of the career focus that is just a function of doing an MBA. Most people are coming to elevate their careers, to career switch. So there's that tension that happens between the academics and the career side. I think the first thing that, I thought to myself from like a mental standpoint is that, what I'm learning in the classroom is going to help me in my career, and is also very applicable, going to help me at least in my consulting case interviews. So I really made it a goal to never skip class unless I absolutely had to for a coffee chat or something extreme. And I think that that's also going to be kind of helpful from a time management perspective, because it forces you to have a schedule and keep to it, and fit in the things that are going to be a priority to you. So I really focused on going to classes and making sure that I got all of that material as much as possible. And it was funny because I remember being in like my Bain final round and getting stuck on a next step in the case, and I could hear my strategy professor rambling something crazy in my head and just kind of vomited the same thing in that interview, and it got me unstuck, and it got me to like what the next step I felt would make sense in that case. So I think that sometimes there's a disconnect of how what you're learning in classes will apply to how you're going to be successful in your interviews, but they really are correlated, and I want to emphasize that because I think that was lost in what MBA 2s above me communicated in the past. So that was really important. In terms of navigating and maintaining that balance between the two, what's nice about working for a long time and not being at least an undergrad is that you're not an individual contributor anymore. You're going to business school to become a leader. And that means learning how to navigate teams and navigate social interpersonal dynamics. And the cohorts and these study groups are built in because that's a microcosm of what you should be doing when you leave business school, which is learning how to communicate your needs, learning how to share deliverables, and making it about teamwork. And so I think understanding that it's not just about your individual contribution, but these teams are set up to help you get through the academics as well, was what got me through my first semester. Because if I tried to pound through every single problem set, every single case, every single written assignment on my own, I would have failed. But because I was able to share the work with my teammates, let other people who were friends in my classes know when I needed help, we were able to share that burden. And that's what allowed all of us to be able to get through and get what we needed to be successful from recruiting, but also be successful with like the learnings and takeaways that we did want to get to be able to validate why we're doing this degree in the first place. So I would say like really rely on your team and recognize like you're not here to learn how to be an individual contributor. You're here to learn how to work within groups, share that work, distribute it effectively, and like get what you need out of it. So that was really important for me. I think that made a huge difference. Otherwise, like you're not an island. Just never be an island. If you think you're alone, you're not. Find someone. People are more than willing to help, and I think that everyone will be successful that way.
No, I think those are all really great points. And a lot of great questions coming in. So Zachary, you had a really good question about, finding that in-semester internship beyond just cold calling. And for folks, this, I think what he's referring to is, in addition to like a summer internship, maybe something during your first year, maybe in like the spring or something like that, or even like a second year, like internship. And Mario had some really great advice in terms of being able to work with clubs who sometimes bring in companies or speakers. And then the other thing I was going to say, Zachary, which I think I just wrote, was around a lot of times professors have great relationships with companies, or in some cases individuals, whether it's because they know them, or in some cases they're actually doing research with them. And so sometimes they might be able to help you out in terms of helping you either find an internship for credit, maybe it is paid, or in some cases, maybe it's just a mini project. But those are all different ways that you can kind of think about how do you build those skills and experiences in addition to internship. So really great question. Feel free to keep coming with the questions in the chat. We'll keep going with them. Mario, I do want to go back to you, and I want to throw out a hypothetical to you, but I also think it's probably something you experienced at some point. I know it's something that I did. So my hypothetical to you is that going off this theme of just having multiple priorities, let's say like you're thinking back to like last year. So you have like a couple company events in the evening. But you also have an assignment that's due with your group tomorrow, and you're supposed to meet with your group tonight, but you have these two events that you also need to go to. How would you kind of handle a situation like that? What's going on in your head? Like, how would you kind of manage that? Because I think that's a pretty real scenario that most of us will have to face at some point.
So you're putting me on the spot with the behaviorals, Al.
I know. What did you know what you signed up for?
No, I think there's two really important takeaways from that. I think first, like, is planning, like, and people plan differently, but I think you definitely want to plan and then communicate. I think those are the two main things that I would say, like, do and repeat. So I think first and foremost, it's like, try not to get in that situation where, like, the night that you've picked is when the companies are coming. I think I have never been as much of a calendarer as I became during business school. But also things will come up, right? Like maybe a recruiter that you met during a presentation offers to meet with you another time, but really it's communicating with your team and setting expectations. So maybe it's you can't meet, but you're happy to review the notes and contribute on a piece that doesn't require meeting together. It's again, trying to plan so you can avoid that circumstance if at all possible, but recognizing that so much of business school is like in the moment. And so I think the more you communicate with people and set expectations, like your teammates are going to be understanding, or in the event that it's an individual assignment, and like you can always get together with a professor. But again, first acknowledging that, like, yes, I know this thing's due tomorrow, but the more you can communicate and plan, the less likely you're going to have, I think, a lot of the situations that end up getting sort of people in trouble with their classmates, right? Like, I think most of the time, anytime I've been really frustrated with a teammate on a project or something, is when somebody's just not communicating. They, like, don't show up to a meeting, or they say they're going to do something and then last minute so they can't. So it's just really keeping that communication open, and setting expectations, and also, like, giving grace to people, because you'll always have, at some point, even if you are the one constantly granting grace to others, there will be a time when you sort of need to, like, ask somebody else for help, because it really just isn't doable by yourself. So that's, I think, that the number one is just communicating with everybody else, and ensuring that you remind yourself and each other that you're all on the same team.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Well, two great points. Number one, I think it's really important just to have those difficult but adult conversations up front. You know, everyone's there for a reason and goals, and, like, you shouldn't, no one should feel ashamed of that, but, you know, part of being an adult is just setting those expectations and having the hard conversations, even if they are hard. But to your point, everyone's got their thing. And so the more you can be empathetic, I also find that the more people are willing to kind of be empathetic, you know, towards you. So
Totally.
it kind of works in both ways. Elijah, I want to go over to you again. So there's a question here about what, if you could do it all over again, what would you have done differently about your first year?
Oh man, that is a question that I ask myself all too often. Well, okay. I typically break down how I spend my time in business school into 5 main buckets. So you have academics, you have career, you have social, you have sleep, and you have personal. And honestly, I wish this, this might be controversial. I wish I slept less and gave more time to the social bit of things. I think I put too much time in academics and too much time in recruiting. But it's the people you meet at B school that really, really define your experience. I can't emphasize that enough. Your classmates, those crucial relationships you make, it's worth a lot. Anyway, I wish I had spent more time talking to my classmates. That's more of a social aspect. But as far as career, I would say before I came to B school, I spent quite a bit of time doing research on industries, what to expect during recruiting. But there are a lot of nuances that you don't realize exist in the recruiting process until you actually do it. So I wish I had called some second years while I was an incoming first year and gotten more of a personal testimony from them, saying, like, oh yeah, specifically at our school, you got to pay attention to this and that. Because if you look at general resources online, they can help you a little bit, but there are just nuances that are different for each school. And there were certain things about, let's say, recruiting for consulting at Fuqua specifically, that I had no idea I needed to deal with when I came. And that set me back a little bit. So I wish I had done more of a personalized, specific kind of research for the career department. I would say those are the main two things.
Yeah. So Courtney, I want to go over to you. So I think it's appropriate now to really hone in on the virtual experience. Number one, because all of you lived it. But number two, I mean, we're all kind of learning at the same time as to what fall is going to be like. And, I think part of it's also going to depend on, what state you're in and what things look like there. But I guess maybe number one, could you share a little bit about what the virtual experience was like in terms of your last quarter? And then maybe number two, I know you didn't necessarily recruit virtually, but, as president of the Management Consulting Association, what are you thinking about in terms of the guidance that you're going to be giving to the incoming first years as they, as you start to think about, the fact like there might be virtual, company events versus, on campus or some of those other types of things?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. It's one that is on all of our minds right now. Just from like a broader school administration question down to, oh, I think someone might not be on mute. All right. But yeah, it's a really big question from like a broader top level, like administrative standpoint of the university down to like, what are we even thinking about it from like a wine club perspective for like people who are running the wine club and have people who, might not even be in the country right now with the way that, county, state, federal guidance is looking like. So I'll start with my virtual experience in the fall, at least from an academic standpoint, since I didn't do recruiting, or sorry, in the spring. I didn't do recruiting in the spring. It's a transition for sure. I don't think I had realized how difficult it would be to go from being in a classroom environment to having to conduct those lectures or do those cases with a group over Zoom. And it's funny because I emphasized a lot how the classroom experience was important to me in my essays applying in the first place. So I probably should have recognized the toll that it would kind of take. It's really hard to maintain focus when you're staring at a dark circle in the middle of your screen right now and trying to be engaging, and just the latency, the lack of it's just body language that you're getting from people. It takes a toll. I think what was helpful was, all of our lectures were recorded for the most part. And I think that a lot of schools do that. And so being able to get multiple touch points with the material, so watching the lecture or rewatching on my own time, or maybe not even attending the lecture, but instead watching the recording and stopping and starting and taking notes on my own, that helped me to be able to absorb the material in a way that was going to make the most sense for me. And I think a lot of schools are now trying to navigate, well, how do we kind of offer our programming almost through like a multi-channel aspect to take advantage of who can be in the classroom, who isn't going to be able to be in the classroom, who doesn't feel comfortable being in the classroom, and attack it at all angles to make sure that the quality of like the MBA product isn't taken away from. So it was okay because there were enough ways that the content was being offered to me that like I could kind of bespoke figure out for myself like what I needed to do. So still attending the lectures and then watching recordings afterwards helped me to make sure that I was still getting what I needed out of the content from what the professors were delivering to us. And they were much more amenable to like creating extra office hours and just making sure that they were really supporting us as much as possible. Like I can't speak to like other business schools, but I imagine that like a lot of it is the same. And it's because like they're very invested in making sure that they can, give you a good quality product, which is your MBA experience. And it's a big part of the conversations that, we're having even with faculty right now as we think what went well last semester and how can we improve it next semester if everything is going to be virtual, or for the portions that are going to be virtual, because, it may end up being some type of hybrid approach for a lot of schools. In terms of what to expect, I would imagine like the recruiting piece is difficult because it's not just about the guidance that we're getting from a governmental aspect. It's also what do companies feel comfortable with exposing their employees to? And do I feel comfortable sending 15 people to UCLA Anderson to do a career fair versus can I replicate that over Zoom? I am on the side of, all of the recruiting random events and dinners and career fairs. Like there's kind of like a recruiting industrial complex where like we over indexed on doing too much of that stuff. And I think now you can almost like probably have a better opportunity to drive more of the recruiting that you do. So using LinkedIn, that's something that we did that's not going to be dissimilar from what you guys will do in the fall, where, you know, we would reach out to people over LinkedIn and say, hey, you work at this firm, they come on campus, I can have a coffee chat through them, but I can see based on your profile that we have something in common. And so I'm reaching out to you and building that engagement. So I think that there's going to be a lot that's offered from the school through Zoom, through like a lot of like companies that are offering these virtual like webinar or career fair formats. But I think there will need to be an element that's self-driven. That being said, I think that it's actually going to be better. It'll allow for more organic touch points because you're identifying what the connections are and reaching out to those people immediately versus walking into like a random networking circle and hoping that you can find something in common. So I would expect a lot of that where you drive it on your own, but I think that it could actually end up being like a net positive for people who have to drive more of it on their own in the future.
Yeah, I think those are great. I think those are great insights, and certainly things are evolving and just trying to figure stuff out. I was on the phone with a school this week, and one of the things they were telling me was they were thinking about partnering with a couple other schools and with one company to be able to, and then to figure out a time where they could host like a webinar that could be amenable to their students who are still overseas. And so there's a lot of things that are happening in the background right now. People trying to get creative, and so it's going to evolve. But I would just say it's going, and but I also think that also opens up opportunities for creativity. No one thought about doing anything like that before, not because we aren't smart or like didn't have the technology. Like I mean, granted, Zoom has come along lately, but it's just we didn't have to because there wasn't that constraint. But now there's this constraint, and so I think there's going to be some interesting things that could happen. And even I actually in the spring, I had a lot of people who were reaching out, and so like I would do stuff like this where I would say, all right, like I'd be happy to do Zoom, but like, can you bring 5 of your classmates and can we do like it in a small group? That way, like I don't have to do like one after another. And I think that was actually great in a lot of ways because people could see other people asking questions, and it was I think in a lot of ways it added a lot of value. So I would just say for those who are curious about it, it's evolving, but also this is also an opportunity for you to write the rules because it really is uncharted territory. So it may feel a little overwhelming, but there is opportunity there. Mario, I want to go over to you because you had some experience recruiting virtually. So could you maybe talk a little bit about your experience and then anything you've learned or any insights you want to add as well?
Yeah, I just echo so much of what Courtney is saying, in that, like, I think the silver lining, not that we don't want to focus also on like the atrocities that are happening around us, but the silver lining is that you are definitely much more in the driver's seat. And so to just give you guys some background, I had an internship that I accepted very early, like when school is starting. And so for me, I was like, great, checkbox, like not recruiting. And it did like, give me a lot of time for other things. But then actually due to COVID, my internship more or less was very dramatically altered from like a real consulting engagement to like a 2-week training. So I ended up recruiting completely virtually, starting actually around the beginning of May. So during a lot of the height of COVID in particular. And I think there's a few different things I would recommend. It's first really thinking about, like, as you're having conversations with people, and I think this is whether it's virtual or not, is like come into the phone call with like an easy ask for the person. Like, don't just like chat and just be like, that was great. Like you're probably calling them because you have an ask for them. And if the ask is just, I'm trying to learn more about this job or opportunity, that's awesome. But it could be like, hey, like whether it's, are you guys hiring? Like, I'm interested in some of the things that you recently did at X. Like, are there any people there you might be able to connect me with? Like, have a clear ask or takeaway from that call, and use alumni. Like, again, like, granted, like I go to Michigan Ross. We like to think that we have some of the best alums out there, and I'm sure the other folks on the call would say the same for their schools. But like, alumni are really, especially now, like trying to find ways to help. And a very easy way to help is to have a phone call with you. So reach out to alumni, and even like I went in so far as to put a LinkedIn post with just like my situation. I made it public, and also just like let like people help you. So even if that's like some of you guys were saying, how can I connect with people in maybe more niche industries like private equity, real estate, whatever, like make that known on LinkedIn. Like people will want to connect with you. Like look up like an area of interest, your alumni network or companies, your alumni network. LinkedIn has a ton of different ways to really filter. And then also use the resources that you'll have at business school. So you're going to have your career services that it's going to be new to them, but everybody's going to be recruiting virtually. Use them to find out what companies have openings and when, to do some of your planning. Like I had a few openings literally emailed to me directly from my career services because they were like, so we haven't been approved to post this because the company doesn't want to like so many people applying, but you have some of the experience they are looking to get. So here you go. Like develop those relationships with that office. It's as easy as having a coffee chat with that career advisor, but they're going to think of you when things come across their desk. And then engaging with clubs. Like great roles within clubs are those that are in corporate relations. Because, you know, just because you take an offer with one firm or one company, if you're building relationships with multiple firms in an industry that you're interested in, you're going to have a lot of relationships with recruiters and people that are on their sort of like recruitment marketing team. So that's another really great way is if you're looking for a leadership position or you're really focused on an industry, is those roles within clubs will really help connect you to people, because those are people that I went back to. I was like, I helped organize a conference. I went back to people that I'd helped bring to campus. It was like, hey, are you hiring? So it's really, to be said, it's relationship building, whether it's virtual, whether it's over the phone, whether it's in person, and fostering those relationships as much as you can, because those are the people that are going to show up for you when potential shit hits the fan. So.
Yeah. That's great. So I'm going to we're coming up in the hour here. So I want to go through one last round of questions. But before I do that, before I go over back to Elijah, I would love for folks to put in the chat. I think all of them have just gave some really great insights about how they're going to navigate how they've navigated the virtual MBA experience. And they've given some tips about how you can as well. And so why don't you put in the chat, like one thing that you're going to do as a result of what they said about how to best navigate the virtual experience. So just put that in the chat right now. And Elijah, I'm going to go back to you for a second. So this webinar is about really preparing for business school. So would love to know from your perspective, either from what you did or just from your own kind of knowledge, like what are 1 to 2 things that incoming students should be thinking about or doing right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's definitely something I asked before I started business school. I'm going to touch on it on the 2 main areas of focus that I did, which was academics and recruiting. So basically just preparing for that pre-business school. For academics, what I would say is take a look at your core curriculum. Schools have a core curriculum. You don't really get to choose your classes typically for your first 2 quarters. And because you're going to be in the thick of recruiting during your first semester at business school, you want to make sure that you don't come into your classes, and especially if you're recruiting for an industry in which your GPA matters and you're looking at that stuff for the first time, because then you have to take time away from recruiting, time away from socializing and taking care of yourself to now begin to jog in that course, whereas you could have hit the ground running if you had done just a little bit of pre-work. So what I did was take a look at the core curriculum and identify classes that you're like, okay, I know this class is going to be a potential weakness for me. I know that I don't have too much exposure to statistics. I could just take, maybe an hour or 2 and just look at some videos on Khan Academy. There are a lot of helpful things on YouTube, a lot of helpful resources online, specifically even B-School resources that you can look into. So find your weak points and just make sure that when you start the year, it's not the first time you're seeing those things and you have some kind of foundation built up. I'm not saying take down the whole syllabus. I'm just saying build that foundation early on so you're not found with too many weak points. Regarding recruiting, I just got to emphasize what I had said earlier, which is do more than just the broad research of what your options are, but it would even be more helpful to talk to second years or classmates or alumni who have been in those industries. So you get a real insight of what it'll be like to recruit for that industry at your school specifically. Again, I have to emphasize it's different for different schools and the requirements are different. So take the time to just talk to a few people. It's usually just 20, 30 minutes and you'll get a lot of insight from that. So I would think about doing that. hitting up alumni specifically, and also just making sure you do have the broad research so you know what industries you're interested in the first place. I know personally when I started school, despite having done research and made different calls, I was confronted with industries I actually didn't know would come to campus, and I was still kind of blindsided by a few really cool opportunities. So anyway, just basically what I'm saying is minimize the surprises that would put you in a weaker position, both academically and from a recruiting standpoint. And it's not a huge time commitment nowadays. You just spend a couple hours a week, a couple hours on the weekend, and you'll find yourself in a much better position.
Great. Courtney, same question. Anything you want to add, like one or two things that students should be doing right now to hit the ground running for the first year?
Yeah, I would bucket across like kind of two people or two types of people. And for context, I did not have a business background. I studied Chinese and government undergrad and stayed away from the business school. So I'm bucketing this across people kind of with a business background, either through academics or through work, without a business background. For those who have that background and can look at their core classes and say like, okay, finance, accounting, stats, I'll probably be fine. I would index on knowing you're kind of starting to prepare your 30, 60-second pitch in terms of like having like a really good authentic story, because you use it so much and you can flex it across industries. But like it was interesting. I found that people actually really struggled with that early on, and there's a lot of material that's given to you to prepare, but just like be very clear on like, what is your story? What do you want to be presenting to people that's going to get them excited about your candidacy and them coming to your school? So I think that that's something that you can flex on. And then my second point would be like having a clear list of goals. Like, what are the top 2 things I want to achieve across academics, career, social, clubs and activities, and then personally. And I think that that'll be like good prep that you can do to go in knowing like you have a plan, at least a start, but like you have something that you can start flexing with. For people who don't have the background, I echo what Elijah said. I did some preparation over the summer. Like I took some additional finance, stats and accounting just to have a baseline to get started with, because I would be in classes with CPAs or people who had worked in IB previously. So don't index on it too much, but spend a little bit of time where like you have a little bit of familiarity, where you're not going to be entering the classroom and start doubting, should I even be here in the first place? Because you should be there. But if that's going to make you feel comfortable, take a couple of hours, do like a Khan Academy. I think there was one offered through my school. I think other schools do the same. There are a couple of other ones that I'm blanking on at the moment, but I'm sure like MBA School has like a lot of this preparation materials listed as well. So I would check Al's website. The second piece I would tell people without that business background is the same as the first set, which is have that list of goals, top 2 to 3 things across school, career, club, social, personal, and go into that and like just know that you're going in for like a learning experience. But I think that'll be like a good baseline to be prepared with and not feel like you're going to be caught flat-footed when you get started.
Great. I think that's great advice. And just so everyone knows, we're a couple minutes over, but we're going to keep going. If you have something going on, feel free to drop. Thank you for joining us, but we're going to keep going. And the other thing I'm going to say before I give Mariel the same question is, if you have any questions yourself, throw them in the group chat, because the next thing we'll do is answer all of those. But if you need to drop because you got to go to dinner, you got something else going on, thank you for joining. We're going to keep rolling with the show. So Mariel, same question to you. 1 or 2 things they should be doing right now to get ready for business school.
I echo so much of what Elijah and Courtney have already said, but I think just to also even just emphasize what I said earlier, like in addition to just planning and goal setting, really, and I know this is going to sound like frou-frou, like I'm bringing yoga into the business school world, but like setting an intention of like who you want to show up as, like I think will really help you navigate what can sometimes be difficult decision making, right? It's like companies have a mission statement, a value statement, companies have a purpose statement, and want to know why. It helps them make decisions quicker, easier, help decide like, should we pursue this innovation, should we not? And I think people don't do that enough. And so you have the time, you've already done a lot of introspection. Like, again, you've gotten into business school, you've had to at least tell somebody authentically like who you are and why you want this. So I think the more that you can put pen to paper on that and do, I think again, what Courtney's saying, don't just have a story for the recruiter, have a story for your classmates, like have a story for yourself. Like that's really going to help you be a lot more convincing in an interview setting. It's going to make you more convincing when you're out at the bar meeting classmates. Like people are going to want to learn about you and know you, and you have an opportunity. Like you could change your name. You're a new person now. Like I'm just telling you, this is like a blank slate. Like you now can be who you want to be and who you're meant to be. So like don't underappreciate the fact that this transition really is an opportunity to like make that happen. So I know those are super broad, but I think that Elijah and Courtney already did a good job of some of the more tangible stuff. So those are my other two.
Great. Mariel, if you do decide to be an organizational behavior consultant, you're definitely cut out for it. I mean, you're going to be a great marketer, so that's great. But like, if you wanted to, you're definitely on the path. So,
thank you.
And I mean that in a good way. But to the other point, I think that both you and Courtney made, the amount of times you have to introduce yourself in business school, I don't even know what it is. It's in the hundreds. And so being able to, and to your point, not just concoct like a verbadum elevator pitch, but to really think about like who you are and like how you kind of say that and how you introduce yourself is really important. And I would say, I actually just gave this piece of feedback, Courtney, to someone in your career center the other day. One of the things that separated some of the really great MBA intern candidates from just the so-so ones was their ability to tell the story about themselves in the interview. And so that starts though with your elevator pitch. And so I definitely think it's worth it to really think deeply about how you kind of tell the story about yourself. So other tactical things that I think could be helpful to this audience. Number one, if you've already moved somewhere or you're moving somewhere, learn all the things that all the stuff that you know you're going to need that's locally there. So like figure out who the dry cleaner is, figure out where the grocery store is, figure out where the Target is, like all those things that like you may not have time to think about once you get started. Just ask the second years where they are and just make sure you just have them. Doctor, dentist, all the things that like in my case, my mom would want me to like figure out. It's worth doing those now. And then the other thing, I mean, there's probably a common list of deliverables that every career center will have you do, like when you get to campus, if they haven't started you in already, in terms of resume, cover letter, company list, networking list, and like LinkedIn profile. If you're super, super go-getter and you have some free time, I'd reach out to your career center and just say, hey, what are the templates for these, or what are the guidelines for these? And, a lot of places I know they'll work with you leading up to business school. So if you really do feel enterprising, definitely take on some of those as I think that could be helpful. So those are my 2 cents. Okay. So we're a little bit over, and I'm just going to check to see if there's any other questions. It doesn't look like there are, but I do want to make a quick plug. If you're looking for any additional resources, couple things I have in mind. Number one, you feel free to check out MBA Insider. It's on Amazon. It's designed right for you all right now. So I think it'll be worthwhile for you to read. The second, feel free to check out mbaschool.com. There's a lot of great resources on there. I would definitely go and check them out. All three of these folks are featured on there in some way, shape, or form, or Courtney's to be featured on there pretty soon. So definitely check out their stories. And there's a lot of great content to help you navigate and get ready for school. My podcast, MBA Insider, you can find it on Apple, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts. And then if you want to subscribe to my monthly newsletter, check out mbaschool.substack.com. And so that's where you can find more information. Stella Park asked about pre-MBA internships, and Courtney said she wouldn't recommend. And I think it's, at this point, it's probably, if you're thinking about this year, it's probably a little, I mean, you could probably swing it, but it'd be pretty tight. I would highly recommend that if there's a skill or experience you want to get, I would think about how you could get that through other places, whether it was Elijah said, Khan Academy, or honestly, just instead of, doing, a pre-MBA internship in product management, go interview 10 product managers for an industry that you care about, and then write up a summary of what you learned and then post it on Medium and share it with your classmates. I think that would be actually pretty worthwhile. And then Mariel, yes, also agreed there. I think that makes a ton of sense, for sure. Great. Well, if there aren't any other questions, thank you all for joining. But if we'll hang for like a couple minutes in case anyone else wants to ask anything, but we appreciate you making time with us. Thanks to our panelists who did an amazing job and also took out some of their time on a Sunday to join us here. So thank you everyone, and have a great rest of your evening.
Thanks, guys. Great to meet all of you virtually.
Yeah. Bye everyone. Bye Jacob.
Bye, everyone. Good chatting with y'all.
Bye, Stern people.
Go Duke.
Ooh, that's a good one. How do you recommend your significant other?
I feel like I need to answer this a little bit. So that's my brother. I'm going to give him a plug. And I also had a significant other. So you guys fill in
Sure.
if you have questions. Marielle, spot on, Partners Club. Schools are very good about making partners be a part of the experience because they're supporting you in everything that you're doing. And so those partner clubs are going to be a great resource. I don't know, this might be a little bit controversial. My talk to my partner was also, it's kind of like starting a new job. There's a lot of transition, there's a lot of learning, and doing your MBA is kind of like an inherently selfish decision. So I think there's also like have that conversation up front that the first couple weeks at the minimum, probably the first few months, there's going to be transition time. You might not be as present as you previously have been in the past, but I think by having that conversation up front and setting that expectation, they'll be much more amenable to those times when you're coming home after a late class and you can't help with certain things as much as you used to, and you can kind of build out a shared schedule together as much as possible. But your universe, to be fair, at the beginning is going to revolve a lot around yourself and your MBA experience. So set that expectation and connect them with the Partners Club, especially if you're moving to a new city where they don't have a community, to help them with building that up for themselves so that they can have something that they can focus on. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, I've seen, and I guess it also depends on the scenario. There's a couple scenarios, right? Like, one scenario is that you're both, like two of my friends, they went to the same school. They literally got married and 2 days later enrolled at Wharton. So like they were both going through it at the same time. I don't know, a situation where one was there, the other was in transit going to move there. And so they were doing long distance for a little bit. Others where it's one is there and the other is, going with them. So depending on like what your situation is, but the one thing that I've seen work well is that there's like, and it will vary for each relationship, but there's like a protected night, or like there's like a thing that you always do and that you always hold like holy, more or less. And whatever it is, it could be Thursday night for dinner or like whatever it is, but just trying to find something where that like you will always make time for that because it's important to both of you amidst all of like what you have going on. I've seen that like work really really well. But this is about business school, not about relationship advice. So take that for what it's worth.
As somebody that entered a relationship in business school, it's planning and communicating. It's like planning and communicating. Because my partner is another business school student, and being that we both came here by ourselves and selfishly came here to fulfill what we wanted, it's setting expectations, planning, communicating. So I can't echo the stuff that's been said enough.
Is your brother going to Stern?
No, he refused to apply to Stern because I'm there. He's going to Kellogg.
Oh, okay.
Midwest, the best, baby.
I don't know about that. But no, it's a great school. It's also purple, so it's like close enough.
Yeah, that's true. That's
very
true.
fair.
Yeah. All right. Well, I don't see any other questions coming in, so I'm going to go and just end this now. But thanks, everyone. Thank you again to all our panelists, and we will have a good evening.
Nice chatting with you guys. Take care.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye. Good luck, everyone.
Brian's here right now.